Welcome to Morning Call, a podcast where we share our experiences around letting go of grief and learn to move with grace through mourning. We are your hosts, Alyce Christina
and Crystal Lee, two friends who connected through yoga and movement and ultimately found a deeper connection over our own parental losses.
We share how our experiences have informed us to live our lives more authentically, boldly, and in the now so that you can do the same. We believe where there is pain, there is transformation.
From the loss of a loved one to change in a career, a heartbreak, identity shift, and many other forms of loss, we walk this path together.
To discover the light within the darkness, we recognize the joy within pain and invite you to dive in with us as we share in the hope, laughter, and lightness of the mourning journey.
Join us for stories, interviews, and conversations that connect us as we explore the universal experience of loss that invokes the becoming of one's true self. Welcome back to the Morning Call podcast. I'm your co-host, Crystal.
And I'm Alyce.
And today we are here with a very special guest, Kyle Freeman, who is a grief coach, grief educator, and grief doula. Welcome, Kyle. We're very excited to have you.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
So tell us a little bit more about these three terms that I just introduced you with, whichever one you want to start with. Grief coach, maybe just give us some more background about yourself and any one of those you want to start with.
Okay. I think I'll start with a little background on myself because it informs what I do today with the grief work. So I used to be a hospice social worker. That was my first career. And I loved it. It's very, very sacred work. Eventually I did burn out, so I moved into a different direction. And then I happened to experience just loss upon loss upon loss in my life. Just very briefly, I've lost my mom to cancer. I've lost my brother to suicide. And I started having chronic health issues in my mid-20s. So I really started to learn what it's like to lose the reliability of a body that works properly. And that has been a huge part of my grief story. And it's one we don't talk about very much, is the loss of health as a grief. So that's something that I'm really deeply intimate with. And then I didn't have children. I wanted to have children. I imagined I'd have children. And that has been a very formative grief for me that did not happen for multiple reasons. And then in my adulthood, I would name these other two. I'm not married. I've been in long-term relationships. And in the last 6 years, I had sort of two relationships that I really imagined were long-term life partnerships that did not work out. So I feel like I joke that I have a PhD in loss because I feel so versed in it. And I feel very passionate about how we support one another in loss. And so I'm also I call myself an anti-shame activist, which means throughout the course of my adulthood, actually after losing my brother, and because I lost him to mental illness, I have a deep passion about speaking up about the things that we're supposed to stay quiet about. And I believe that speaking up can save lives. And so all of that has rolled together to become a grief specialist. I guess all three of those things might fall under that. But really, I don't see myself as an expert. But what I feel so comfortable with is spending time in the dark with people and companioning them through it. So that's my deepest passion, is I describe it as crawling into the cave where it's pretty dark in there, but I don't want people to be alone, because I think the best way or the most peaceful way to emerge from loss is to have company. I think one of the things I've learned in my grief education, of me being educated on grief, is that grief does not heal in isolation. And it's a fine line because there's an impulse when we're grieving to sort of just really button up, be alone. And yet we know that grief needs air and life from others. It needs to be witnessed, our stories need to be witnessed, as you guys know. Um, so yeah, so I'll talk a little bit about like the distinction between a grief coach, a grief educator, and a grief doula. So I can work with someone at any point after a loss, and the loss does not have to be a death. It could be a breakup, the end of a relationship, the loss of health, the loss of independence. So I'm very creative and open about what grief applies to. So the grief doula term is a newer term I've been using because I'm just now working with somebody whose loss was a month ago. And this is going to be, I'm going to be like weaving the three terms. So it's just bear with me. So grief coaching, let me start there. Grief coaching is typically for people who have gone through a loss. They've moved through the most acute phase of it. They're functioning, they're carrying forward, but there's still grief, and they're wondering, like, what was that all about? Like, have I been changed by this? And if I have been changed, what do I want that to look like? So coaching tends to be pretty forward thinking. We definitely do grief support work, because grief is a very long journey. For some of us, it will last a lifetime. So, but the thinking with grief coaching is really like, what's my goal for like the next 3 months or 6 months? And reflection on how has this changed me. It's about like making sure you have a tribe that's going to walk this path with you. It's learning tools to cope with emotional dysregulation, and learning tools about what's grief and what's like rumination and obsessional thinking, and that's just causing me more pain. So like fleshing those out can be a part of grief coaching work. The grief doula, the reason I'm using that term more recently is because that's with someone who has just experienced a loss. I mean, I had a young woman very recently who her loss was 2 weeks prior, a sudden loss of her father. And we're not talking about like what's happening 3 months from now. You don't have a goal for 3 months or 6 months from now. Your goal is, how do I get through the day? So the grief doula work is more like being a bit on call for people who are like, oh, I don't feel like I can survive this. Are you out there right now, Kyle? So the grief doula work might be texting. It might be someone saying, hey, do you have a half hour today? And I try to keep my schedule loose and flexible so that I can meet the needs of people who are going through acute loss and need to just talk to someone in the really near term. Whereas my grief coaching clients, we're booking out. We're like a week after a week after a week. Grief doula could be like, can I have a touch point each day? They want to know what's normal. People are really desperate especially people who are going through their first major loss. When they're not eating, they're not sleeping, they're feeling nauseous. They're like, is this normal or am I going crazy? They're like thinking they might be seeing their loved one, worried that they're hallucinating. Like those are like, I see my work there as like helping someone bear those early stages and help them get through those early stages in the same way that a birth doula helps a baby being born, in the same way that a death doula helps someone leave life. Like, I feel like I'm there for the immediacy of that. Does that make sense between the grief doula and the grief coach?
Yes.
And then the grief educator is kind of what it sounds like. I can speak with groups, one-on-one with people about just really like, what does the grief process look like? So it's really just community educating, one-on-one educating, and it sort of weaves through both of those populations.
I really could have used you in that doula phase, that acute phase. I had a lot of physical symptoms that I was so surprised by. I mean, they kind of lasted for quite a while. In the beginning, like I was like, I'm going crazy. I thought I was going to have a heart attack myself because my dad passed from a heart attack. I was having terrible anxiety, chest pain. And it took a while for someone to say, like, this is all a normal part of grief. So I just love that you're doing that. One thing, you said a lot of things that I want to kind of like go back to, but a couple things that we talk about a lot on this podcast that you touched on are One, I mean, this podcast exists because we want to talk about the things, to your point, that are often just in the dark and in our society are kind of like pushed under the rug. And we believe that naming things and bringing things to light, to your point, can be healing. So I think just that, even just the education piece, like talking about things, naming things, using language around grief is so important to us. And you also mentioned community. We talk a lot about community being a part of healing in general, whatever kind of loss it is. So I don't know if you want to expand upon either one of those a little more, like how you would, I don't know, consult someone to like build their community or something.
Yeah. I mean, I will say from coaching, one of the biggest takeaways people seem to get from it is like there's so many of us who have a very hard time asking for help, right? It's hard for almost everybody. And so we really break it down. Like I'll have people make a list of these sort of granular things that they might want help with. And or something is like someone to go on a dog walk with them. And so we make a very concrete list, like what are and really like brainstorm, because people are like, well, I guess bring meals, but it's like no. There's like a million ways people can help, not just bringing meals. So we get creative. I really work with like who this person is, what matters to them. And then I encourage people to find 3 people that can be a part of their tribe who are not family members, not people who are actually going through the same loss, because no loss is the same, but like say it wouldn't be a sibling who's also lost a parent. I want it to be 3 people who are just there for you. And then we put like a strategy in place, like how are you going to communicate it to these 3 people? How are you going to share this list? How can we get people to actively like address these things on the list with you? So we get very concrete and strategic. And that has been incredible. Like the people I've worked with have definitely said like, I feel better now at being able to ask for help. And I'm like, you know what? If that's one of the things that comes out of this loss, that is not a small thing.
Yeah.
That's so powerful to have. Like, I've done something similar in the leadership coaching that I do, and do something similar where we have interview questions. Someone goes to you, like pick anywhere from 5 to 7 people to interview, and their questions about you, like, what's my super, what do you see as my superhero power, or what do you want me to master in the next 10 years, right? And so it's like seeing yourself through the reflection of someone else, right? And from there you get like an upgrade of how you perceive yourself. And I'm just reflecting back on, I'm grateful I had a community of people that still do to this day. What do you need? What's required for you right now? Like, or if I post something about my mom, I have someone call me right away, a friend or a girlfriend that's like, what do you need today? Which is so special, and to be empowered to ask for that. Especially, and to be able to identify, like, because then, I mean, I remember crying in my closet, not wanting to come out, and I'm grateful I had my daughter and a partner to be like, okay, you can stay in there for a little while, and we're gonna come get you in about 10 minutes or 15 minutes, and or come out when you're ready, and we're here, right? But to identify and have someone lead you to identify what those things are is so, I can only fathom how much more I would have been able to kind of navigate in that moment, especially when it was so fresh.
Yeah. And I want to speak to the phenomenon, and we all know it, which is when someone's going through a loss or a crisis, we say, let me know how I can help. And like that is sometimes not helpful, right? That's making making this list, very specific, detailed list, is very helpful to other people, because then they don't have to say, what can I do to help? Right. You've given them this list. They can figure out what works for them, what doesn't. Yeah. Because and we live, I mean, I think it's part of capitalism. We're just trained to be fiercely independent, that we don't have to rely on people, and like, I think something I've learned, I think what brings me to this work also is that because I haven't been partner of children, I've lived alone for many, many years. And so I've gotten really good at asking for help because of my health. I've had lots of phases of despair and grief and loss. And I've learned how to use like social media strategically sometimes, but I've also, and I'm pretty vulnerable in how I share on social media, mindfully. I don't do it recklessly. But beautiful things have come to me. Beautiful people have come to me who I wouldn't even have imagined might want to be in my tribe. So I really, it's hard work, but important work to figure out how to ask for help. And sorry, one other thing before I forget. Um, I think also we underestimate the degree to which someone can hang with tough stuff. And so I really encourage people, don't sell people short. And yes, some people can be in the dark with you and some people cannot. And that's also part of our work together, is accepting that those people aren't bad. The people that can't be in the dark with you are not bad. You can still love them. They can still love you. You'll just have a different type of relationship with them. But don't underestimate the number of people who can actually go into the cave with you, because there are more than you think. I just know that.
That was going to be my question, is because you mentioned that like your clients will come back to you and say one of their biggest takeaways is like empowering them, feeling empowered to ask for help. And I was going to ask you, do you feel like they are either like surprised or pleased with the responses? Because I do think, like, yes, there are people that are like, they won't go there. They're afraid to go there, to be in the dark, to talk about the quote dark stuff. But I think people actually do want to help. They just like, to your point with the whole, like, let me know I can help. Sometimes we don't know how to ask because we're in a grief averse society. We're in a society that doesn't like to talk about the quote hard things. So, but I think if someone is given the opportunity, most of the time they're going to want to. So do you also find that they get like good responses?
Yes. Yeah. And we, one of the things we do together is we think strategically, like that we talk through like, who is the best person for this tribe so that they're having a high success rate. So together, we're thinking like, and if I hear a clue that like, oh, maybe that's, I don't know. Do we think that's actually the best person for your tribe? Maybe not. So we're very thoughtful about who we ask, who they ask about this list.
Tell us, because, I attended this grief workshop that you held, which was fantastic, and I feel like was very well received and people were engaged. So like, as we're talking about this, like best practice, if you will, of like creating a list of community to ask for help, what are some other suggestions you may have for someone, whether it's in that acute phase of like the death doula phase, or whether it's kind of like quote later down the road as you're coaching them? Like, what are some of your more favorite best practices you would share?
It's a good question. It's kind of a tough question because it's so tailored to each person. But what I do, I actually try to do a lot of teaching of tools while people are moving through grief. So I don't know if you guys have heard of tapping, EFT, emotional freedom technique, this stuff. So that's one of the main tools that I teach. And people have actually I've been shocked at how helpful it's been for people who decide to try it. I mean, I've had people say like, this actually makes me a little nervous. They're like, I don't even think I need therapy anymore. Like, this has been so helpful. Like, well, I'm not a therapist. And that is something I make very clear when I'm working with people. And just a little tangent here. I will sort of talk with someone initially, do the free consultation piece where we really talk about their history and I get a better sense of like, is this appropriate for coaching or would this be better fit for therapy? And then also if I'm working with someone and we're getting to a place where like, oh, something is getting dredged up, because that happens with loss. One loss brings up the residue of an old loss. And sometimes people can get really triggered. So if that happens, I could say, I think maybe this would be a moment to sort of diverge to therapy. Anyway, But if they are suitable for coaching, which most people are, because grief is not a disorder, I really feel passionate about that point. We've pathologized so many things about the human condition. Grief is one of them. I do believe that grief can become complicated and prolonged, and people need intervention. For the most part, I believe that people can bear their grief and that they can move through it and not get stuck, because that's where we get alarmed, is when it gets stuck. So anyway, I try to teach people. We definitely use mindfulness. I won't even call it meditation, because I think meditation can be too daunting for many people, especially if you're in a crisis. But when I say mindfulness, like, we'll start every session sort of doing a grounding mindfulness practice and teaching people the basics of, like, all right, what are some things you're hearing right now? Like, well, how can we get you in your body? I think grief is so terrifying and so overwhelming that we want to get out of the body, right? You're like, I don't want to feel this because it's so physical, especially acute grief, right? You all know, like you were describing it earlier, Crystal, like, it's in your chest, it's in your heart, and it feels unbearable. And you're like, how am I going to get through this? Um, Remind me, there's a poem I want to read before we're done that is beautiful. Um, so helping people understand the difference between what is the grief and what is, like I mentioned this earlier, just like spinning in rumination and obsession. And that can look like regret or guilt. That we're never, sorry, there's so many pieces that I get excited on how to so talk about it clearly. I never want someone to use a tool to stop grief. So I wouldn't be like, oh, how about you tap when you feel the grief coming on? That can be useful to keep it flowing. But I tend to coach people more about using something like tapping or mindfulness or other emotional regulation tips when they're spinning. Is this making any sense? Like, there's a difference between grieving and spinning. And spinning might look more like, oh, if I had only gotten home in time, maybe I would have been there when they died. Or that's actually not the grief. The grief is they're gone and you didn't get home in time and you didn't get to see them. Like, let us support you in that emotion, as painful as it is. But if you're spinning about a story, that might be when I like, let's try some tapping. Like, and you get to keep telling yourself the story. You get to really focus on the feeling of the story while you tap. And almost always people get reduced in the obsessional thinking, because it's like the tapping is built on this acupressure points, and keeping energy flowing. And I used to never, this all was a hogwash to me. I was like, tapping, what the fuck? Like, I was like, even mindfulness meditation, I'm like, fuck you. Like, I just can't. So I need you to know, I've come to this like kicking and screaming, and like, now I get that this stuff matters and it helps and it works.
What you're speaking to, like, as far as like the tappings when someone is in a story, like for me, it just, I mean, that just completely lands because it's bringing someone like to the present time, right? Like out of that story of what could have been or what they think should have been, or out of this regret or whatever it is that's coming up. And like, that's my whole practice is getting people in their bodies, right, to feel the experience now, right, to feel that grief now, to rebuild around it, right? Because it's like I've almost shifted and working to shift my own language around this sense of healing, because I don't think that we truly ever heal. What we do learn is how to move with that grief hand in hand, in the waves of despair as much in the wave of celebration, right? Like, I was just at the beach with my family celebrating my dad's 75th birthday, right? And remembering that we didn't get to celebrate my mom's 70th birthday, or the last time we were supposed to be at the beach together was for their anniversary, and that's like, that never happened. And like, just talking about it, like, I can feel the tears welling in my eyes, right? And to also recognize that deep sorrow and to be able to stay in that, like, the gratitude for being in the moment, right? And yeah, I think that that is such, also in my experience of like that early grief, like, I drank a lot. And that was part, and I didn't want to move. I stopped moving. I was afraid to move because I was too afraid of what was going to come up, right? And so, and I am grateful for my movement practices that brought me out of like this like numbing phase, that numbing period, because it sparked, I created a whole project, a dance project and a film. And right, like, it's like the creative, once I allowed myself to move, that was such like a huge part of me learning how to move and navigate with my grief. And all that to say, it's like to have someone to usher you forward, especially in the depths, is so valuable, like more valuable than I could ever fathom. Like, I want to do what you do. Right?
You're making me think of something, Alyce, that I want to say, which is the wisdom. It's like you said you were drinking initially to numb it. And again, it's a fine line between trust. I believe that grief knows, in the same way that the baby kind of knows how to be born, I believe that grief knows how to move. But there are, and there could have been, I mean, as long as you weren't drinking dangerously, there may have been some wisdom in that moment. Your system literally may have been like, you know what? I can't feel this yet. As long as you're not harming yourself or harming another person, like, and it doesn't go on forever, like, then we're like, okay, this is a problem. This is stuck. She's not feeling grief. She's feeling numb all the time. But like, in this say, I mean, this will be like a micro example, but like, say some people, I think a lot of people feel guilty if they laugh after an immediate loss. Like, should they have fun at all? And it's like, no, that's grief knowing what to do. Because it knows that you can't be exposed to this 24/7 and survive. It's so wise that your body wants to laugh or do something frivolous. That's so wise. Thank you, grief, for understanding that.
Yeah. Well, and it's like a part of that, like, I think like the physical movement, whether it's tapping, whether, I mean, there's just so many practices out there that I don't think people recognize, like sound therapy. um I I'm just going to yoga, running, whatever it is for you. For some people, it might be painting, or writing, or whatever that movement is is getting out of the head, right? Getting out of that analytical shoulda, woulda, coulda, what should be happening, and into the wisdom of the body, which is, I mean, yeah, it's like we're neck up thinkers in a society where, if I believe, like, if we can get out of the head and into the body, we have access to what it is we need or the answers we're looking for.
Yeah, and this reminds me of at least something you literally just posted that I'm just reading it. It says, getting rid of pain is not the same as healing. Healing is the capacity to hold the pain. So oftentimes like that, like spiraling or catastrophizing, like that is the, like, kind of the mind's way of like trying to process, like, what happened. It's like living in the past, or the shoulda, coulda, wouldas, living in What I would have done, and that's actually, the pain is underneath that. Like, that's almost like a processing, or it's a way to like not cover the pain, but maybe, or like a
Distract.
defense mechanism. Yeah, it's a distraction. So it's actually being able to like move through all of that and get to like the root of the pain and then sit with that. It's not like getting rid of that like root pain.
It's like feel what you feel. And sometimes, well, one, we're not taught to feel what we feel often. And from a very early age, we're like, don't act out. Don't feel that emotion. Be a good girl, like don't be too loud or whatever it is. That when we have these massive experiences or traumatic experiences of loss, that it's like we don't even know what to do with our feelings. So, and we're taught to suppress it or avoid it. And that's not my line of work.
Crystal, I just thought of something from your earlier question about things I do, tips or tricks. Something I do with folks, I I basically, in the same way that I think one of the things that can come out of loss is getting better at asking for help. I think another thing that can come out of loss is improving the self-compassion relationship with yourself. And so I one thing I do is yes, community, we need community so much in grief, and we also need ourselves. And so one thing I'll have people do, it's people will always say things to you when you're grieving that don't land right, right? Even if sometimes, like on a certain day, someone will be like, "How are you?" You might be like, "What do you mean? How am I? Someone just died. I can't answer that question." Right? Like we're constantly misattuned to when after we're going through a loss, right? People mean so well. They're trying their best. I have some coaching for those folks too, but we'll stay on it. So what I do is I say, let's do an exercise, and this is more of the coaching, not the doula phase, of let's write a script, the dream script for what you wish someone would say to you. And I learned that this comes from a personal experience. I can't remember if I shared this in the class, Crystal. I may have, so I apologize if it's redundant. Well, it won't be for others. But so this was after my mom died. I'm so sorry, not after she died, after I knew she was sick. I came back to Boston after being in Pennsylvania. And I just was in so much, I was like, I knew that her diagnosis was terminal. And it was bringing up so much of my childless grief because I was watching myself companion her as almost a primary caregiver, thinking, oh, who's going to be there for me? Like, I just feel like I'm helping make her end of life so much better. Like, who's going to be there for me? And it just brought up so much grief. I just remember sobbing on my living room couch about this, just the combo of my mom dying and not having kids. And I just let myself say out loud to myself, which is what I wish someone else would say to me, this is so unfair. This is so unfair that I don't get to have kids the way most people get to have kids. And there was something about letting myself feel sorry for myself and having almost a tantrum about how unfair and unjust it was that my mom was dying and I didn't have kids. And for the first time in my life, I remember I was just like, oh, that's what I needed to hear. But I was able to provide that for myself. I knew the script, and I'm the only one who knows the script, unless I literally hand it to somebody else. And I felt comforted in a way, self-comforted in a way that I've never felt before. And it has stuck with me to this day. Like, oh, I'm available. I'm actually available in there for myself.
Yeah, that's so powerful. It's like giving yourself permission to take a nap when you're tired, right? Like that. And sometimes, I mean, even now, I'm like, I just feel so drained today, right? And I used to like push through it, power through it, get another cup of coffee, go to yoga again, like, and that's not being compassionate with yourself, right? And to be able to identify exactly what you need and then put words around it, like
And like the better, the more like infantile the script, the better in my mind. Like say the things that like no one's expecting you to be a grown up in this moment. No, just like really let
Throw
it.
the tantrum, right? Like, right, yeah, like, yeah, and it's interesting. I remember when it's bringing up a memory for me when Amelia was younger and we were in Target, and she had to be like 2 or 3, and she just would not stop crying, and I had it up to here. I didn't know what to do. I like just sat in the middle of the aisle. I crossed my legs and I put my head in my hands, and she stopped crying, came up to me, put her hand on my shoulder, then touched my face. I was like, Mama? And I was like, if you're going to do it, I'm going to do it. Right. Like, I was like, I can't, I don't know. I don't know what you want from me right now, And it's just like, having that compassion in any phase of life, like, so it's like I recognizing when I see a mom with 3 children that are all screaming, right? Like, it's like, I don't want you to think I'm a creep. I'm staring at you, but I'm just like, I just want you to know that like I see you and you're doing great, right? And I think that the same goes for grief at any stage of like having that tool to give yourself the script and to be able to give the script to your tribe to be like, hey, I'm going to need you to ask me this on a daily basis at first, or every 5 minutes, right? Or every hour on the hour, whatever it may be.
Yeah, that's such a good suggestion. It's kind of like the concept that everyone's heard about of like writing a letter to someone, but you don't send it because it's like even just getting the words out like to yourself and like saying them to yourself, hearing what someone else might not have the capacity to tell you. And it's like, I can take care of myself. I can give myself what I need. I love that.
It's like an energetic shift, right? Like it's like clearing your field, right? To make room for what will lift you up as opposed to what's keeping you down.
Another thing, Alyce, so when you said your daughter did this to your face, it reminded me that's actually something I teach my clients is when we start out a session, we'll do like this mindfulness thing and I'll ask them to just hold their face. I'm even going to ask you to do it right now. Just like put your hands on your cheeks for a second and just feel like the inherent tenderness of that and the warmth between your face, your cheeks and your fingers. And just like I do this with myself when I'm feeling kind of dysregulated or triggered about something, when I want to like remember that I can be tender. It just feels so good to me. I don't know how it feels for you guys, but
It feels amazing. Really
because
feels amazing.
no one does that to us anymore.
I know. I know. Or even like I've been doing holding of myself too. Like I do have a meditation practice. My therapist recently has been like encouraging me to like add like physical. I mean, meditation includes like breathing. Obviously, it can include other physical things. But she was like, just what if you just hold yourself while you meditate? And I'm like, yes, it's amazing. It's amazing.
I do that with my senior. I teach senior citizens and movement classes, and it's like we just give ourselves a hug because I'm like, how, like, I would come around and hug you, and I have to be mindful that some of them are not like. And it's like when was the last time you were held? Who holds you on a daily basis? And we can hold ourselves, and energetically, collectively doing it together, making eye contact is um such a powerful, again, like physical thing to do as well as like an energetic thing. Like it opens and clears pathways to remembering, right? That it's like it's intimacy with yourself.
As we're talking about the physical pieces of like the healing journey, Kyle, you mentioned, this basically just body grief, right? Like having chronic illnesses, I think, dealing with, or coming to terms with a body that just may not function as you would like it to. Um, it just made me think of, we were at a retreat. The retreat we met at was with Ruby Warrington, and she recently posted, I hope I'm going to get her name right. And if I don't, I'm going to put it in the notes. I think she helped a woman named Justine Mattingly write a book around like her own body grief. So I guess maybe just share whatever you're willing to around like how your own body grief has informed your own journey to do what you do today.
Thank you. That's a really nice question. Yeah, and honestly, I would say that in some ways has been my biggest grief. And I will say my health story is complicated, so I won't get into the details of it. But basically, there was a period of time, about 5 years, where I really was pretty homebound. I couldn't have people. One of the things that I contend with is something called hyperosmia, which is it's a neurological disorder where I have an extreme sense of smell. So it's almost like I smell more like a dog. I don't smell like my smell functions almost like a dog, right? Perhaps sometimes I smell like a dog. Um, so basically it got so severe where I couldn't really have people over because their products, their laundry products, their personal products, I just couldn't tolerate them. And it was the darkest time of my life. And some days I'm still like, wait, how did I get through that? Because I have had improvements in my health. I'm very, very lucky to say. I've actually not lucky. I've worked really hard to make gains. And what that has looked like for me is kind of changing my relationship to physical. So I have a couple of chronic pain disorders. And I used to let the pain, and this is sort of a metaphor for grief probably, I used to let the pain dictate what I did and where I went and where I didn't go and how long I could be in a car, couldn't be on a plane. Like the pain used to just terrify me and paralyze me. And through a lot of work, I now have a different relationship to my pain. I still have pain every day. I have it right now. I have bladder pain and vulvar pain. And I say that out loud because that's not something we're supposed to say out loud. So in my practice as an anti-shame activist, I have these pelvic pain conditions. It basically feels like having a UTI and a yeast infection kind of every day. So and I've had this for years, to varying degrees. So I have learned, okay, I could stay at home with the pain and have a very small life, thinking somehow that by having a small life, it's controlling the pain, but it's actually not. And so I have learned how to go out again into my life with the pain in hand. And the work I've had to do, the mental work I've had to do, the spiritual work I've had to do, is the physical work I've had to do to pull that off has been very hard won. But I've learned, I still get to have life, even though I have this pain. And similarly in grief, it was sort of a little bit like what you were saying before, Alyce, like we get to keep living, even though this pain is a part of us and this grief is a part of us. And that has changed my life, that lens. I still have the grief because there are things that I can't do with my body. There are a bunch of things I can't do with my body. I can't ride a bike. I would love to ride a bike. There's other more personal things I won't share that I can't do with my body that people can do freely. And I've just had to say, like I've grieved it so much, but I now accept it. It's similar to the grief of a lost loved one. Like we do get to some place of acceptance. And I used to hate gratitude work. I was sort of like, fuck you. Like, don't tell me what to be grateful for. Don't, like, and then I learned it's not just new age toxic positivity. I learned that it actually, for me, focusing not as much on what I can't do with my body, but focusing on what I can still do with my body has been pivotal to coping with the loss and the grief around my body. So, and I think it also helps the pain sometimes, the neural pathways around gratitude, we know releases feel good endorphins, and those can be anti-pain, anti-inflammatory. So I take these things that I used to just bristle against and just feel like it really was just toxic positivity. And I'm like, oh, there's wisdom there. And I've incorporated some of those things into my life. It doesn't mean sometimes I'm like, I don't know. No, I'm not grateful for this. Or, I still let myself tantrum. But that's, yeah, yeah, exactly. That's how I get through. Does that answer your question, Crystal?
Yeah, for sure.
Were these health things, were they stemmed from a direct loss? Or do you think that they are connected to?
What I think things got worse after, so my brother died, and then my mom was diagnosed with cancer 2 years later, and then died 4 years later. So those were pretty rough, like 6, 7 years. And I will say my pain conditions all got worse. And my story is such that I was born with basically UTIs. I sort of had UTIs almost at birth, and had for the first 4 years of my life constant invasive catheterizations, surgery. I basically had a urethral birth defect. And I think that's probably at the core of my continued pain conditions today. And I also think I immediately learned loss upon life. Like, the whole goal of the first year of life is to feel like safe for the organ. If we want to call it even an organism, like really make it scientific, it's to feel like it's a safe place to be, is in the world. For me, it was not safe. It wasn't safe in my body. I had pain. I had pain all the time. I was on antibiotics every day for the first 4 years of my life. Kind of cooked my like biome, really set me up for issues. But I also just learned, oh, I don't think this is what life is supposed to be like, but I didn't know any better. So I really experienced loss at a very young age, loss of safety, loss of comfort in the body. And I think that's what has primed me to feel so comfortable in this space. Honestly, I was comfortable with death from the get go. And that, the things I went through medically were so stressful. And I now understand from the help of therapists, so traumatic, that I'm guessing my little body was like, oh, I'm being annihilated. This feels life threatening. The degree of like physical pain and terror from the procedures. I'm guessing I felt like, oh, I might die from this, even though I wouldn't have. And so I've been comfortable with death. Like, I've been comfortable around elderly people. I've been comfortable around really sick people. I didn't understand for a long time why I felt so comfortable in that space, but I suspect it's connected from my early trauma.
I mean, and a twist is like what a gift your experiences are to people now and to yourself, like I am a believer of allowing these experiences of life, as individual as they are, being a tool for transformation and recognizing and coming home to like our own individual purpose of like what our own unique gifts are into the world and the people around us.
Yeah. And I also, at the same time, I want to give permission to folks to, not that anyone needs my permission for anything, but to give voice to the possibility. Like, I hear people who have stories of chronic stories, and they say, I wouldn't undo it. I would keep everything that happened in my life because of who I am today. And I want to just give permission. It's also fair to say, you know what? Actually, no, I wish I hadn't gone through those things. I think my life would have been really blessed in other ways. And I would have learned empathy in other ways. Because I have days where I'm like, I really wish my body didn't get that treatment and early in life. So I just want to leave room for all of it, right? Like, and I do know I wouldn't be who I am today without everything that's happened to me. And I like who I am today. So
I do think there is a fine line because I have a gratitude practice as well, but I do think there's a fine line between gratitude and toxic positivity. What do you all think is the difference? Like, I guess I'm just, Kyle, as you were talking, I'm sort of like, is gratitude like holding space for, I mean, I'm asking you all, because like holding space for like acknowledging the hard part and at the same time saying, you know, and I'm grateful that it taught me X lesson. Is it like that, holding both, and then toxic positivity is kind of like only focusing on the positive and what you've gotten out of it? What do you all think? Does that make sense what I'm asking?
yeah, it does. I think my bent on this is that I never, especially people in early grief, like I'm not bringing up gratitude. Like I'm like I don't want to short circuit the pain you're feeling right now. I don't want to invalidate it. I don't in any way want to do that because I think that's what causes grief to get stuck. So I am very delicate about how I bring up the possibility. It's really not till the coaching phase. Like if someone has that ideology already, I've had people who are like fresh off a loss and they're like, this is so painful, but I am really grateful for this. I'm like, awesome. That's amazing that you can see that right now. What a gift. But if that, I really let that be dictated by their baseline proclivity for gratitude. In the coaching, because I do believe that gratitude can be healing and it can help distract from the like obsessive ruminations about regret and guilt, etc. But I don't rush people at all. Like if it's super important to me that people get to say what they're actually feeling. And if it's week after week, just like bitterness, resentment, like, you know what? That's what they're feeling. Then there comes a time, and this is what I think is the fine line, when like you might say to someone, I know that so understand why you feel so angry about what has happened. And we've talked about it and like, or angry at a sibling for what they did at the end of your parents' life. We might gently walk into the territory of, um, would you be open to another lens that I may have a different view on this? But I only do that after they've been given great time and space to have all the ick, all the like painful, angry, bitter feelings. I don't rush people. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because we have to, like, use you in the general sense. Like, we as humans, if we don't let that, like, whatever it is, bitterness, anger, sadness, blah, 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 out, and we only, like, yes, and we only pivot to the positive, like, right away, it's going to sit, like, we're talking about things living in our bodies. It's going to sit in our bodies. It's going to manifest in, like, illness or something down the road. So, to your point, it's like we have to allow that piece of the process to occur on whatever time frame it's going to until we can present, like, yes, and there's also this lens to consider, so I love like allowing that piece for sure.
Yeah, because I think it's like you just said. Like I think this comes a little bit from like losing a brother to mental illness, and thinking about how alone he must have felt in his mind, and that if I just know I don't want anybody to be alone. I just don't want people to be alone with the things that they think about. Because for some of us, like that whole, my going to my brain alone is a bad neighborhood, and I shouldn't go in there alone. Like that's real. That's real.
Yeah. I think that that's like the fine line came up in like if you see a constant story replaying, right? Like it's beginning to manifest itself in like for me example, like if the drinking would have spiraled into like all day, every day, affecting how I parent, how I partner, in the relationships that I have around me. Was it healthy? No. And like, was that, there was something else, or whether it was my body that was like, okay, you need to start moving again. Or, that led me to, okay, it's time to let that go and move into this new phase.
I love what your family did, Alyce, when you said that they let you cry for 10 minutes on your own. And like, that's beautiful. Cause right, you need to be by yourself to do, but like, we won't let you stay in there forever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like they allowed you to do both. Like, this is your time to cry, do your thing, and we're also here. Like, I love that.
Yeah, we're here waiting for you, or we'll come check on you again in a little while. Like, Crystal, just one more thing before we move on from that fine line is also, I think it's very rudimental of like that people are doing their best kind of thing. And it's like that gaslighting of like, well, at least they didn't suffer, or, like comments like that, where I'm just like, yeah, or just, it's like I hear people say it and I know it's coming from a good place, and it's like sometimes I want to be their coach. It's like the people supporting the people like also need, because we're not being coached. We're not being taught how to hold space for someone.
Maybe that could be its own episode, Kyle. We can have you back to talk about how you would coach those like loved ones of someone grieving, friends of someone. I'm sure you have lots of thoughts on that. I just want to be aware of time. And so I'm curious, you mentioned your brother and you mentioned a poem. Is this
Yes. Let
the
me
same?
grab
Is
it.
this the poem? Okay.
Wait, go ahead. Is it what?
Is this the poem that came up during your grief workshop? Oh, well, can you tell that story really quick before you share the poem? Okay, okay.
Yes, I would love to share that story. So, I was doing this class that Crystal attended, and prior to the class, I felt very nervous, as one might, and I have a habit of like turning to my brother, my deceased brother, and asking him for just some comfort and guidance and presence, to be present with me. And I had taken out I had this little button with his face on it that I had made for a fundraising thing. And so I put that on my desk so I could see it during the class. And we get to the end of the class, and incidentally, it felt a bit like out of nowhere, but someone in the class said, "Oh, there's this poem that what Kyle has made me think of, and what other people have shared has made me think of, called The Invitation." And it talks about like basically standing at the center of sorrow and not turning away. But anyway, this poem, and again, it was at the very end of the class. It feels like it could have easily have gone unsaid by her. My brother, years and years ago, years before he died, had made this printed, framed poem with dried flowers on it. My brother was adorable. And it was the poem, The Invitation. And I had like basically asked my brother, like, can you show up some way, somehow? Can you show me that you're with us tonight? Of all the poems in the universe that this woman could be like, this made me think of this poem.
Oh, I love that. How special.
Actually, maybe you should do another episode about those kinds of experiences.
Yeah, signs.
After death experience. Yeah, that would be really
for sure. Absolutely.
Okay. I just came across this morning, and it used to be a poem in what I call my despair years, where I was really isolated with my health and really sad, and really grieving. This was a poem that I had like up front and center, and it has not been up, because I haven't needed it as much, but I reread it this morning. I'm like, oh, okay. Let me just go ahead and read it.
Yes. Let's hear it.
Okay. There's no name on it. So there's the author is there, but okay. The thing is to love life, to love it even when you have no stomach for it, and everything you've held dear crumbles like burnt paper in your hands, your throat filled with the silt of it. When grief sits with you, its tropical heat, thickening the air, heavy as water, more fit for gills than lungs. When grief weights you like your own flesh, only more of it, an obesity of grief, you think, how can a body withstand this? Then you hold life like a face between your palms, a plain face, no charming smile, no violet eyes, and you say, yes, I will take you. I will love you again.
It's so beautiful.
By Ellen Bass.
Okay, Ellen Bass. There's not a name of the actual poem?
If there was one, I didn't write it on this piece that I transcribed it on.
I will love you. I'm like, I'll choose you. Yes. It's like, I think tying that into that self-compassion, right? In grief, it's so great because we are left living, right? And to comprehend what was lost and really to make the choice to keep living. And I think that's one of the, we say it time and time again here on Morning Call. It's what has, like, this is our yes. This is how part of the reason we are here and how we're choosing to live our lives, and share and connect and inform and educate and let people know that they're not alone in these experiences.
Well, thanks for the work you guys are doing and doing this podcast. It's awesome. I love it. I'm excited to go listen to some of your old stuff.
Yes, and thank you for being here. We'll link to both. I'm going to look for it. That poem. I want to link to the invitation because I went and read it after your workshop. It was amazing. We'll link to, where you exist online, your websites, and
Is there anywhere that we can let people know where to follow you, whether Instagram or website?
I just have one Instagram for my whole life now, but that is where I post grief related stuff. It's where I post anything about my life, but there's grief stuff sprinkled in there, which is kyle.freestyle is my Instagram.
Thank you for joining the Morning Call podcast. Our intention is that you found a nugget of hope, inspiration, connection, or all of the above.
if you seek to dive deeper with the Morning Call community, email us, subscribe to our page, leave a review, and fill out our survey.
We want to hear your stories and widen the conversation to support and empower our grief experiences as we collectively become our true selves.
Find us and subscribe on all streaming platforms, YouTube, and at Morning Call Podcast on Instagram. You can also email us at morningcallpodcast@gmail.com.
This podcast was edited by Alexis Carrasquillo from Familia Creative Media.